Hey guys, today we're in the book of Judges, chapter 11. So now we move on to another judge, and his name is Japheth. We have Japheth, who was a Gileadite. Now remember, Gilead is the east side of the Jordan, right? So it's not necessarily in the promised land. It's on the east side of the Jordan, of the tribes of Gad, the half tribe of Manasseh, of that kind of right side, east side of the Jordan. And so we come up to Japheth. We find out a couple things. One, he's the son of a prostitute. His mom is just a common prostitute. But he grew up with many brothers, and basically his brothers are going to, as he grows up, he gets married, but his brothers kick him out and says that, hey, you're never going to inherit the king, because he's not truly one of... he's not a legitimate heir to the throne because his mom was a prostitute. And so in verse 3, we see that he went to the land of Tob, which is what we would call Syria today. So that is north of Gilead. You just go completely straight north and you come to Syria. He's there, and we find out that there's worthless fellows collected around him. Now, when you see this word worthless, in our mind, we think bad guys. It's not bad guys. It means poor people. It may actually truly translate to people who do not own property. Homeless people, poor people. And so as he goes north to Syria, a lot of people follow him, and he becomes kind of a leader of sorts of these poor people. But after a time, Amorites made war with Israel, and when the Amorites made war against Israel, the elders of Gilead went to Tob and said, hey, Japheth, come and be our leader. Japheth was a mighty warrior. We saw that in the very first verse. And so now he's left, and now the Amorites are coming in, which is the very southern part of where they're at, right? So if you think of, we have Syria, we have the land of Gilead, and then you have Moab and Edom, or the land of the Amorites, right? And so it's just directly below them. So they're starting to come north to take over Gilead, and they figured out, hey, we need a good warrior. We need a leader. And so they send their leaders up to Syria that said, hey, we know we called you illegitimate, but will you come and lead us and help us defeat the Amorites? Come and be our leader. And Japheth was smart enough to ask them, in verse 9, he says, if you bring me home again to fight against the Amorites, and the Lord gives them to me, I will be your head. Japheth was smart enough to say, if I come and fight for you, and if we win, and if the Lord gives them into our hands, then I will continue to be their leader. He wanted to make sure that he wasn't just getting used to be a war general to defeat the enemy, and then they would kick him back out. So he wanted a promise that said, I will be your leader during war and after war if God gives them to me, if God allows me to win. And so all the men of Gilead, the elders, said, absolutely, we promise. And notice where it says, and Japheth spoke all of his words before the Lord at Mizpah. Now, Mizpah is a place. We've seen this before. We've seen Jacob and Laban all the way back in Genesis. They made some promises here. But what's interesting is the word Mizpah simply means to watch. And it's the term of kind of them making this promise where Japheth is saying, the Lord is watching. You've made this promise, so if you go back on this promise, the Lord is watching and he will deal with you, right? So they make this promise at a real place, but it has a real meaning, right? So Mizpah. Then Japheth sent messages to the king of the Amorites and basically asked, hey, why are you coming north? Why are you coming to invade us? We didn't do anything to you. And then the king answered back and he said, well, you invaded our land. You've taken land away from me. Japheth writes back and he says, whoa, whoa, whoa. We didn't do anything, right? The Lord brought us from Egypt. He brought us from the south, and we wrote to the kings. We wrote to Sihon and Og. Remember those kings? We wrote to them into the land of Moab and Edom and to say, hey, let us walk through. We will take nothing, but we are going to Gilead. We're going to the promised land. We're going north of you. And all of the kings said, absolutely no way. So what we had to do is they had to walk around. They had to go farther out in their desert, farther away from the Jordan River, and walk up alongside of them and come into the north, into Gilead, where they were at. They were living there, but Sihon didn't like that, right? You remember that story? Sihon didn't like them going around, and so Sihon brings the Amorites against them. And he starts to wage war against civilians, against Israel, against women and children. And so God gave the Amorites into the hands of Israel. He defeated Sihon. And so as he defeated him, Israel took the land. That was very normal, very common. And so he said, so Israel, verse 21, it says, so Israel took possession of the land of the Amorites who invaded the country, right? So we won the war, so we took the land. So then the Lord God of Israel dispossessed the Amorites. It means that the Lord moved the Amorites and gave us this land. And then notice in verse 24, I love this, right? This is Japheth. He's writing all of this, and he says, will you not possess what Chemosh, your God, gives you to possess? Now, Chemosh is the Amorite god, right? And basically he said, we've been here for 300 years. We've been living in this land for 300 years. And now you are coming to war against us. He says, basically saying that Yahweh defeated Chemosh, the Amorite god, and we have lived here for 300 years. Why now do you come and attack us? You know that Yahweh is greater than Chemosh. And so why now? Well, what's going on? Why are you doing this? Yahweh is greater. And so we see... let's see, verse 27, therefore I've not sinned against you. Do me no wrong by making war on me. So he says, so we've done nothing. We've been here. We defeated a king. We've taken his land. The kings before you have not come against us. Why are you coming against us? In verse 28, but the king of the Amorites did not listen to the words of Japheth and that he sent him. Then the Spirit of the Lord was upon Japheth. Notice that. Then the Spirit of the Lord, right? It hasn't been up into this point, but now that it is, because they're about to go into war. There's about to be a battle. He has stood up for the Lord, and now the Spirit has come upon him, which means courage. And so courage has come upon him, and so now he starts to move south towards Amorite. Verse 30, Japheth made a vow to the Lord and said, if you will give the Amorites into my hands, then whatever comes out from the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Amorites shall be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. Now, when you read this, it seems like a good thing, right? Japheth is coming down and he says, Lord, if you will do this, then I will. The problem is, this is not the way that we make promises to the Lord. This is not a good vow. This is a foolish vow. This is a vow that people use, that we use, that Japheth uses a lot of times to try to manipulate God. If you will do this, then I will do this, right? So he's riding into war and he says, Lord, if you'll give me the win, I'll give you whatever comes out of my door to come and meet me. Now, when you read this in Hebrew, he's not thinking of a person, okay, which will be a person later. He's just thinking, whatever comes out of my house, whatever it is, I will sacrifice. I will give to you. I will honor you. But if you do this, Lord, then I will sacrifice to you. Then I will honor you. Then I will give you. See what's happening? This is a foolish vow to make. But he makes the vow and he rides into war. The war, and God gives the Amorites into him. They win. Then we learn the horror of this vow. Japheth came to home at Mizpah, and behold, his daughter came out to meet him with the tambourine and with dances, and she was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son nor daughter, and as soon as he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, Alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have brought great trouble to me. He's riding home and he remembers the vow that he made. And as he's riding home, the first thing he sees is his only child, his daughter, running out the door with tambourines and dancing. My dad won. He's the victor. All of Israel would have been rejoicing along with him. Right? And so as soon as he sees this, he instantly remembers the vow and he tears his clothes, right? We've seen this time and time again. This is a sign, this is a Jewish sign, a Hebrew sign of grief. It's like tearing his heart out, right? He tears his clothes because he now knows what he has to do. Now, what's interesting is, did he have to kill his daughter? Yeah, I would say no. Though he made a vow, it was a foolish vow. He did not have to make the vow. He could have not done that and kept his only child, right? Did God want his only child as a sacrifice? No, I would say no. But on the other hand, notice what he says in verse 35. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, and I cannot take back my vow. Even though he made a foolish vow, even though necessarily he didn't have to keep his vow, notice the character. Notice the dependence upon the Lord. I made a vow to the Lord, so I must keep it. He saw no other option but to sacrifice his one and only child. And so he tells his daughter the story, and his daughter says, give me 2 months. Let me run up and down the mountain with my friends and let me mourn what's going to happen, that I will never marry. I will never get to know a man. I will never have children. And Japheth agreed to that. And she does that with her friends for 2 months. And then after 2 months, she comes and Japheth sacrifices her to the Lord. And we find out a little Jewish history, and it says she never known a man. And it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went up year by year to lament the daughter of Japheth, the Gileadite, 4 days in a year. So this became an every year thing to remember this vow that was made, to remember that the Lord gave the Amorites to Gilead and to Japheth, and this became an event. Wow, what a story, right? So it's just kind of an amazing story of somebody who was kicked out. God brings back, he uses, but even though a good and godly person sometimes does wrong things. And so that is the beginning of the story of Japheth. But we'll finish the story tomorrow in chapter 12. God bless.